Book it.
I'm not as well read as I'd like to be. There's just no time to read. If you're like me, you're always on the go.
And there's always so much work to do. Either I'm busy cooking dinner, or I just have to read. Even hard finding time to reflect, pray, and meditate.
Follow me to find your next read. Adult story time for professionals.
Book it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Adult Storytime for Professionals. I am your host / book reviewer, Ramela Jean L. Kurzesi, and I have a BA in economics, PhD in IO psychology, and what I do is each week I spend a half hour talking about one book. I flip through, I've never looked at this book before, I read excerpts, share my reactions, and at the end, I don't give a thumbs up or thumbs down. Instead, I give an indication if I will try to fit it into my schedule and keep reading, because none of us have as much time as we would like. So, with that being said, this book is The Idealist, Aaron Swartz, and the Rise of Free Culture on the Internet. I do not know who Aaron Swartz is. I feel like I should, but I don't at this point. The book is by Justin Peters. All right. A smart, lively history of the internet free culture movement and the life and shocking suicide of one of its leaders, Aaron Swartz, a founding developer of Reddit. Ooh, okay, so right out the box we find out who this is. Aaron Swartz was a zealous young advocate for the free exchange of information and creative content online. He committed suicide in 2013 after being indicted by the government for illegally downloading millions of academic articles from a non-profit online database. From the age of 15, when Swartz was a computer prodigy, worked to launch Creative Commons, to his years as a fighter for copyright reform, to his protests against Stop Online Piracy as a cultural icon, Swartz was inextricably connected to the free culture movement. Now, Slate correspondent Justin Peters examines Swartz's life in the context of 200 years of struggle over the control of information. In bristly, thoughtful prose, The Idealist situates Swartz in respect to other data moralists, past and present. From lexicographer Noah Webster, the book explores a history of copyright statutes and the public domain, examines archivists' ongoing quest to build the library of the future, and charts the rise of open access, copyleft, and other ideologies that have come to challenge the protectionist intellectual property policies. Okay, so my initial reaction is, certain things become so well known that they cross over into the whole idea of being like, you know, the public, like being public. But just because something is so pervasive and everybody knows about it doesn't mean it belongs to the public. You know, happy birthday. I don't know who has the rights to those now, but anytime happy birthday is publicly performed as part of some, you know, thing where money is being made, you know, you only get a couple of bars, and then after that you're expected to send a royalty check to somebody. The ditty to happy birthday is owned by someone. Should it still be owned by someone? I don't know, but it is. You know, someone spent time creating that song and that ditty, and, you know, their descendants, presumably, maybe someone else owns it at this point, but presumably someone that the creator designated to have an ongoing benefit to that after their death made that decision. So, you know, as someone who makes creative content, and hopefully would like to make a lot of money off of my content, I don't think it should be just where you can just take it and do whatever you want. I mean, but having said that, there's certain things where there should be free access, like software. You know, you shouldn't have to try and shell out a bunch of money to be able to just type. You know, in fair disclosure, you know, I have a ongoing monthly subscription to Microsoft Cloud 360, and it works, or 365 or whatever it is. I pay my little $7 a month so that I can have access to all these apps, and that seems like a fair price for what I'm getting. There has to be some sort of balance, and so anyway, I've taken way too long. But that's my initial reaction to this book. It's like, I don't know if I agree. All right, let's see. All right, so this is the introduction, the bad thing. And I'm just kind of randomly flipping through. I was on page 11. All right, so now I'm on page 5. Excuse me. Swartz had been in his hole since the arrest. In a sense, at times it seemed that he would never be able to emerge. His decision to spurn the proffered plea bargain had irked the prosecutors, and since then, the two sides had been at loggerheads. As the April 1st, 2013 trial date approached, the lead prosecutor said that he would request a federal guideline sentence of at least 7 years in prison if he won the case. Attorney's office in Boston had delivered a 13-count felony indictment and pursued the case with what Swartz and his allies considered disproportionate zeal. Getting caught inside an irrational, inflexible system, one that made no provisions for his own exceptionalisms, was Swartz's greatest fears. He had fled from most of the hierarchies that he had encountered during his life. High school, college, the business world. He departed all three prematurely to find himself unable to accept their partitions and constraints. The Department of Justice was yet another sclerotic institution with best withdrawn from rather than withstood. But a defendant cannot unilaterally withdraw from a criminal indictment, and that was perhaps the worst, most frustrating thing about Swartz's legal situation. He couldn't improve it, and he couldn't escape it. The exclusive right of a man to his literary productions and the use of them for his own profit is entire and perfect, and the faculties employed and labor bestowed are entirely and perfectly his own. On what principle then can a legislator or court determine that an author can enjoy only temporary property of his own productions? I kind of agree with that, but let's see. All right, so many of the dictionary's definitions betrayed Webster's authorial biases. Consider the definition of the word press. A French press is a great blessing to free people. Licentious press is a curse to a society. Or take the definition of property, which Webster used in part as a declaration of the morality of copyright and as a defense of the authorial ownership mentality, which was the passage I just read. This argument is problematic, not at least because evidence suggests that Webster may have plagiarized from existing works while compiling his dictionary. Oops. Yeah, you can't be a hypocrite. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's see here. So, long story short, it appears that Webster was an advocate for copyright laws. In 1837, the popular nautical adventure writer Captain Frederick Marryat came to America to do battle with pirates. Marryat had spent 24 years in the Royal Navy and had used his experiences as the basis for a series of exciting novels about life at sea. The books were widely read in English-speaking world, and for them he was relatively well paid. For his 1836 novel, Mr. Midshipman Easy, Marryat earned about £1,400, worth approximately £144,000 today. It was less than he thought he deserved, and apparently he blamed his publishers for taking the lion's share of receipts. He wrote, "We all have our own ideas of paradise, and if other authors think like me, The more pleasurable portion of anticipated bliss is that there will be no publishers there. Yeah, so that's tricky. I mean, there's lots of well-established authors that have recently gone and done some self-publishing, and it's working for them because they're already well-known. If you're a nobody, how do you take your book that may be fabulous and may be one of the best things ever written and can get that into the public eye? And without losing some control over that by trying to get it looked at. I could go off on a tangent about me looking for an agent and a publisher for my book that I've got written now, which is Short Stories of Violence. Just give that a plug. But yeah, so anyway, tax on knowledge. I'm now on page 55. The White Shoe East Coast publishers were not at first threatened by the rise of railroad literature. Frank Leslie's audiences and George Haven's Putnam's were presumed to have little in common than dimes and sentience. Cheap book publishers were more reinforcers of public taste than creators of them, as Lawrence Park Murphy put in Mandolin B. Stern's valuable anthology on the topic. Putnam and his oak always had higher ambitions. I don't know if I've heard of Stearns, but we all know Putnam, so I guess that's who won that battle. Anyway, like the antebellum pirate publishers before them, Lovell and his peers claimed to be performing a public service and disseminating good, inexpensive literature to the unlettered American hinterlands. Their firm openly courted working class and impoverished readers. Their books were often shoddily made and astoundingly cheap. Published in paperback, circulated by rail and mail, their loyalties were to themselves and their customers rather than their industry colleagues, and they had no interest in respecting the customs of a club that existed to exclude them. But the obverse of corruption is opportunity, and the political machines and political bosses offer disenfranchised merchant groups opportunities that might have otherwise been withheld. And in Machine Made, a recent reevaluation of the Tammany Hall era in New York City, Terry Galloway argued that under Tammany, the right to vote became in part a means to an end rather than an exercise in civic virtue. Okay, up to this point, I guess talking about the role of economics in the sharing of ideas is laying the groundwork for how we arrive at Aaron Swartz. I don't know, I guess I was thinking that this would be more linear and more straight to the point, focusing on, I don't know, the dissemination of materials, basically pirating them, not necessarily creating new works and selling them cheaply. But okay. Now I'm in the chapter, A Copyright of the Future, A Library of the Future, page 83. As librarians and scientists were touting technology's ability to ease and improve the spread of information, a group of copyright lawyers were meeting in Washington, D.C. to discuss ways to restrict that data. The federal copyright statute had gone largely unrevised since 1909 and was far behind the times. I'm confronted daily with what is now being called the information explosion and the communications explosion, said L. Quincy Mumford, Librarian of Congress, in 1965. It's obvious to me that these revolutionary developments carry with them a profound challenge to creative endeavor, and that our antiquated copyright law must be revised to meet this challenge. The longer this task is delayed, the harder it will be to accomplish, and the more serious the loss for our future generations. Now, in case you missed it, this was 1965, and basically copyright laws had not been revised since 1909. And we didn't have the internet back then, and that argument was being made, so that's quite interesting. The university has traditionally been a gift economy. Research is produced there and disseminated to the world. Academic givers benefits. The academic gift giver benefits when his theories and discoveries gain acceptance and adoption. Others then use his work to make new discoveries, from which the initial gift giver in turn derives benefit. Non-academic work, however, exists in a market economy where cultural artifacts are bought and sold, and the creator benefits by reaping financial reward from the sale of his work. The creator is not giving gifts to the public. He is rather selling goods to the public, and he needs the money because, unlike his professorial counterparts, his salary is not generally underwritten by a large, benevolent institution. Libraries and universities pose an apparent threat to copyright guardians because they ostensibly represent a gift economy that exists to disseminate information for the betterment of the commonwealth rather than to control the flow of information for the benefit of the creators. All right, so let me stop right there. That's not entirely true. I mean, I think we all know that professors at universities are expected to do two things. They're expected to publish or perish, and they have to publish a lot to be able to get tenure. And the second thing is, in order to do that research, and another metric that determines if they get tenure, is how well do they bring in money to the university. So getting those research grants is a big deal for a lot of professors. So to say that they are just kind of there, benevolent, disseminating information just because they can, it's not that simple. I think many people that choose to work as academics are doing so because they do want to be able to increase the general knowledge of people, but at the same time they have real world concerns just like someone in the private sector does. So I'm not with the cultural gift giving. Let's see. It wasn't a really sophisticated scene, honestly. Wes Felter said of the AIR's Tech Conference circuit. Swartz was obviously less mature than the other people there, but I would say not by a wide margin. All right, let me skip ahead. Something more referred to the internet and its unique decentralized architecture. Technologies need to tell politicians the importance of the values held by the technology, continued Lessig. In Swartz's rendering of the speech, they have a Valenti-like view of the world. Their terrorist war against the most important industry in America. Rhetoric is the right, but the target is wrong. Technology is the most important industry. Need to let the folks back east understand this. The remarks were at a recruiting pitch soliciting soldiers to join the cause of free culture. How could Aaron Swartz decline? All right, so that's how he got into it. It's interesting we're 135 pages in, or at that time 132 or 3 or whatever it was. And now we're just kind of figuring out how he became part of the free culture. Anyway, let me flip here. All right. Co-opt or destroy, page 163. The Open Content Alliance was formed in response to Google Print for Libraries and Google's usually ambitious attempt to visit academic libraries with advanced scanning machines and systematically digitize every single book in those libraries' collections. It appeared to be the most significant step yet toward making an infinite library a reality, and indeed, Google today stores many complete public domain text on its servers, which can be read and downloaded by anyone. The problem, as Kell saw it circa 2005, was that Google seemed less interested in building a vast library than building a vast online bookstore. We have been very clear that we want to build a book-finding tool and not a book reading tool, a Google print official told San Francisco Chronicle. The project would not create an organized, browsable online library. Instead, it would present limited excerpts that would direct web users towards retailers where they could purchase the books in question. That's very true. That's what we have now with Google. So anyway, Guerrilla Open Access. Page 173. Getting real information to people on the World Wide Web. Initiate a discussion about real information in the internet, be it a blog, mailing list, message board, client chat, social networking site, or a tin can telephone, and you could count on Aaron Swartz eventually joining the conversation. That's kind of funny. It's called Stealing or Piracy, Swartz wrote, as if sharing a wealth of knowledge were the moral equivalent of plundering a ship and murdering its crew. But sharing isn't immoral. It's a moral imperative. Only those blinded by greed would refuse to let a friend make a copy. Any reluctance to embrace free culture is a function of greed for Swartz. The moral equation was often that simple. During his work with Open Library, for instance, Swartz hoped to utilize existing online catalog records that had been created by a pioneering library consortium called the Online Computer Library Center, or OCLC. OCLC was the first group to digitize massive amounts of card catalog information, and its database, WorldCat, which we've all used, I'm sure, today contains almost 340 million bibliographic records itemizing the collection of libraries around the world. Let's see. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology is not configured to address the sorts of philosophical and ethical questions that one might expect a great university to address, in part because it is not and has never been a university. It is rather a technical institute. This distinction may seem like a minor semantic point, but our self-description sets implicit boundaries that we are often loath to cross. Ever since its establishment in 1861, the Institute has trained engineers and pursued practical applications for existing and emerging technologies. A Center for Applied Thinking and Science specializes in the practical rather than the philosophical. It is, as the scholar Josh Wynn once put it, the model capitalist university. That's an interesting way to look at MIT, because MIT is viewed as a research institution of preeminence. It's like essentially Ivy League, but for engineers, and just Ivy League period in some respects. So to look at it as just being about blatant capitalism is kind of interesting. Not that you don't necessarily get that from other, quote, Ivy League schools like Harvard or Yale or whatever. But that's an interesting statement about MIT, and the distinction between it being a university and an institute is also very interesting. If you're an institute, your role is to innovate, essentially. And I don't think I'd ever really thought of it that way before. Okay, so that was the alarm signaling that I need to try and wrap up this episode. I don't know. I mean, I think this book is interesting, but for me, it's not riveting. I think I would probably Google to see what happened with Aaron Swartz's case. Although the fact that he committed suicide probably gives away that ending. And in fact, I think we just kind of read a little bit about that, where he was going down and was going to be doing some jail time. But anyway, I just don't know about this book. I think, because of me and my mindset and what I'm personally trying to accomplish in my life, the idea of someone just kind of taking your stuff and doing whatever they want to do with it, and not recognize your labor that was involved in it, is troubling to me. I think maybe Schwartz was privileged growing up, so he had time to kind of, explore and develop and be this child prodigy, where there might be children out there that are equally gifted, but their parents don't have the resources to enable them to have the experiences that maybe Schwartz's parents gave him. And so he got that prodigy label. I think the idea that I'm trying to get out there is you can talk about philosophical things of give it away, it should be open to everyone, when you don't have to worry about how to make money for yourself. But if you are a creative person working in the arts, theater, trying to build your video game for your app or whatever in your basement after work, you want to make money off of your stuff, and you don't want someone just taking it from you. So there's certain things where it makes sense to have it be free and open and collaboration for better good of sharing knowledge, but there has to be some balancing of recognizing the effort, time, labor that went into creating that thing, and seeing that those people are properly compensated, and putting that against, or keeping that in mind with how you make that available to massive people. So I don't, obviously have an answer for that, but I do think it's not as simple as, okay, you made this, so now I know about it, so now I can just give it to everyone. That's not how it should work. I don't think really that's how most people think it should work. Certainly a musician who's been working and trying to, pay their rent by working, as some waitress or whatever, or bartender, whatever it may be, they want their hit single to do well so they can stop needing waitress. If somebody's taking your stuff and just giving it away, people are still having to waitress or tend bar. So anyway, I've gone on too long about that. The book is The Idealist, about Aaron Swartz by Justin Peters. This book isn't for me, but hopefully if you found it interesting, you will go out and read it cover to cover, and maybe draw on some ideas that can help you become an activist in this area, balancing the two things that I've mentioned. So until next time, thank you so much for watching this episode of Adult Storytime for Professionals. Bye-bye.